there's a particular kind of vigilance that some people carry into adulthood. A scanning quality to how they enter relationships, how they read approval in someone's eyes, how they calibrate their worth based on who stays and who leaves. It's not obvious, it doesn't announce itself, but if you know what you're looking for, you can see it. In the way someone withdraws the moment intimacy deepens, or in how they become the most responsible person in every room, or in the quiet belief that love is something you earn through perfection, not something you simply receive. What these patterns share is a common origin story. Growing up without a father, not just physically absent, but emotionally unavailable, inconsistent, or gone entirely. And here's the paradox. The absence of one relationship shapes the template for all future ones. A space that was never filled becomes the organizing principle of a life. In this video, we'll unpack why father absence creates such specific psychological signatures and what it reveals about how we learn to be human. Because this isn't just a story about loss, it's a story about adaptation, identity formation, and the hidden architectures of attachment that we carry without realizing. You might recognize this in yourself or in someone you love. You're the one who never asks for help, who learned early that self-sufficiency isn't just practical, it's survival. You watch other people lean on their partners, call their parents when things fall apart, and you feel that slight disconnection, like you're observing a language you never quite learned to speak. Or maybe you're the opposite. You find yourself clinging in relationships, reading into silences, needing constant reassurance that this person won't disappear. You know logically that your partner loves you, but there's a part of you that can never fully believe it, that's always braced for the moment they realize you're not enough. Or perhaps you became the achiever, the straight-A student, the overworked employee, the person everyone relies on. You built your identity around being needed, because being needed felt safer than being wanted. Competence became your currency. And then there are the subtler signs. You struggle with male authority figures. You feel uneasy in your own masculinity, or uncertain about what healthy male presence even looks like. You parent with either hypervigilance or detachment, terrified of repeating the pattern, or unsure how to do it differently. You choose partners who are emotionally unavailable, recreating the dynamic you're trying to escape. These aren't character flaws, they're adaptations, and they all point back to the same formative absence. Here's what happens psychologically when a father is absent during critical developmental windows. Your brain is wired to form what's called an internal working model of relationships through early attachment experiences. These models become the unconscious blueprints for how you expect others to treat you and how you treat yourself. When a primary attachment figure, particularly a father, is absent or inconsistent, that blueprint gets encoded with a specific set of expectations. People leave, safety is temporary, your worthiness is conditional. Attachment theory tells us that children need secure, responsive caregivers to develop a sense of basic trust. When a father disappears, through death, abandonment, divorce, or emotional withdrawal, the child's nervous system learns a pattern. Connection equals risk. Intimacy predicts loss. The closer you get, the more inevitable the abandonment. So you adapt. Some children become anxiously attached, hypervigilant, always scanning for signs of rejection, preemptively people-pleasing to prevent abandonment. Others become avoidantly attached. They learn to suppress their needs entirely, to become emotionally self-sufficient, to never risk depending on someone who might leave. But here's the deeper mechanism. Father absence doesn't just affect attachment style, it affects identity formation. Particularly for boys, a father serves as the first mirror of masculinity, showing them what it means to be a man, how to regulate aggression, how to balance strength with vulnerability. Without that model, boys often construct masculinity from cultural fragments, media, peers, trial and error. They end up performing masculinity rather than inhabiting it. For girls, a father's presence or absence shapes their understanding of male attention, their sense of worthiness in relation to men, and often their romantic template. An absent father can create what psychologists call a father hunger, an unconscious search for paternal validation in adult romantic relationships, which inevitably creates confusion between partnership and parenting. And here's the question that complicates everything. What if this isn't dysfunction? It's intelligent adaptation to impossible circumstances. To understand why father absence creates these specific patterns, we need to trace the timeline of development. In early childhood, between ages 2 to 6, children are forming their core sense of self. They're learning the answer to fundamental questions. Am I worthy of love? Are my needs legitimate? Is the world safe? A father's presence during this stage, his attention, his play, his attunement, helps answer these questions with a yes. His absence answers them differently. A child doesn't think, my father left because of his own limitations, his unresolved trauma, his inability to stay. A child thinks, there's something wrong with me. I wasn't enough to make him stay. This belief doesn't live in the rational brain. It embeds in the limbic system, the emotional core that governs all future relationships. During adolescence, the stakes change. Teenagers are individuating, separating from parents to form their own identity. But individuation requires a secure base to push away from. Without a father, adolescents either individuate too early out of necessity, becoming parentified and prematurely adult, or they struggle to individuate at all, remaining dependent or enmeshed with their remaining caregiver. Now layer in the cultural context. We live in a society where father absence has reached epidemic proportions through incarceration, divorce, military deployment, work demands, emotional unavailability. Approximately 1 in 4 children in America grows up without a father in the home. This isn't just an individual trauma anymore, it's a collective adaptation. And culturally, we've created narratives that make this worse. Single mothers can do it all. Kids are resilient. You don't need a father if you have strong role models. These narratives, while well-intentioned, often silence the legitimate grief of children who do, in fact, feel the absence acutely. The message becomes, you're not allowed to miss what you never had. So the wound goes underground. It becomes something you manage rather than mourn. The effects of father absence ripple across every dimension of adult life. In romantic relationships, you might find yourself in one of 2 patterns. Either you choose emotionally unavailable partners, unconsciously trying to win the love you never received from your father, or you push away available partners, convinced that closeness is a prelude to abandonment. Both patterns serve the same function. They confirm what you already believe about your worthiness. In your relationship with yourself, father absence often manifests as a harsh inner critic. Because you internalize the abandonment as proof of your inadequacy, you police yourself relentlessly. You achieve to prove your worth. You perfect to prevent rejection. You monitor every social interaction for signs that you've failed, that you're too much or not enough, that people are about to leave. Professionally, the patterns split. Some people become overachievers, constructing entire identities around success as a way to retroactively earn the validation they missed. Others struggle with authority, feel chronically underemployed, or sabotage opportunities because deep down they don't believe they deserve them. As parents, the wound often resurfaces with particular intensity. You either overcompensate, becoming hypervigilant, never letting your children experience the absence you did, or you repeat the pattern, emotionally withdrawing because you have no template for engaged fatherhood. You watch yourself do the thing you swore you'd never do, and the shame is crushing. And here's the statement that might divide you. Father absence doesn't create damaged people. It creates people who learn to survive in the absence of safety. The problem isn't what you became. The problem is that the world keeps asking you to operate as though you had a secure base when you never did. The question isn't, what's wrong with you? The question is, what did you have to become to survive that loss? So let's reframe this entirely. What if your hyper-independence isn't fear of intimacy? It's evidence that you learned to build your own foundation when no one else was reliable. What if your people-pleasing isn't weakness? It's a sophisticated strategy for maintaining connection in an unpredictable world. What if your emotional guardedness isn't dysfunction? It's a rational response to early abandonment. The adaptations you developed weren't mistakes. They were intelligent solutions to an impossible problem. You couldn't make your father stay. You couldn't fix what broke in your family system. So you did the only thing children can do. You changed yourself to fit the situation. You became the good child, the responsible one, the one who didn't cause problems. Or you became the rebellious one, acting out the grief no one acknowledged. Either way, you were trying to make sense of a loss that made no sense. Here's the paradox at the heart of father absence. The wound creates both the adaptation and the longing. You learned not to need people, but you still need them. You learned not to trust closeness, but you still crave it. You learned to be self-sufficient, but part of you is still that child waiting for someone to show up. And maybe, your avoidance of vulnerability isn't fear. Maybe it's a kind of hope in disguise. Because if you never risk fully opening, you never have to fully face the disappointment that no one can retroactively give you what you missed. The guardedness protects not just against future hurt, but against the full weight of past loss. But here's what changes when you reframe the pattern. You stop pathologizing yourself. You stop seeing your adaptations as evidence that you're broken, and you start seeing them as evidence of your resilience. You survived an early rupture in the most foundational relationship. That's not a deficit, that's an accomplishment. The work isn't to erase what you became. It's to grieve what you lost, and then to consciously choose which adaptations still serve you and which ones you're ready to outgrow. So how do you integrate this understanding without falling into self-help platitudes? First, you name the pattern without shame. You notice when you're withdrawn in moments that call for vulnerability. You observe when you're chasing approval from people who can't give it. You recognize when you're parenting from hypervigilance instead of presence. The noticing itself is the intervention, not to fix, but to witness. Second, you practice distinguishing between past and present. When your partner is quiet and your nervous system screams they're leaving, you pause. You ask, is this actually happening, or is this my history speaking? Sometimes the answer is both, but the practice of questioning the narrative creates space between stimulus and response. Third, you find safe relationships to practice repair. Because here's what many people don't realize. Attachment wounds can heal, but they heal relationally. You need corrective experiences. People who stay when you expect them to leave, who respond when you risk asking, who prove through constancy that your early model was incomplete, not definitive. This doesn't mean finding a surrogate father. It means finding relationships, friendships, therapy, partnership, mentorship, where you can slowly relearn what secure attachment feels like, where you can be imperfect and not be abandoned, where you can need something and not be punished for it. Fourth, you grieve. Not performatively, not productively, but actually. You let yourself feel the loss of what you didn't get. You stop minimizing it with other people had it worse, or I turned out fine. You honor that it mattered, that his absence shaped you, that you're allowed to be angry, sad, confused, all of it. And finally, and this is the hardest part, you make peace with the fact that you'll never get the childhood you needed. Your father, even if he came back, even if he apologized, even if he changed, cannot undo what happened during your formative years. The best you can do is become the secure attachment figure for yourself that you wish you'd had. To learn to stay with yourself when things get hard. To learn to validate your own worth instead of searching for it in others' eyes. It's not the same as having had it from the beginning. But it's something. And sometimes, something is enough. Zoom out for a moment. This isn't just your story. This is a species-level pattern about how humans form in the context of absence. We are relational creatures. Our brains are literally wired to develop in response to the quality of our early relationships. A father's absence isn't just a missing person, it's a missing developmental experience. It's the absence of co-regulation, of secure attachment, of mirrored identity. And that absence gets coded into the architecture of your nervous system. But here's the broader question. Have we, as a culture, mistaken stoicism for strength? Have we taught people to function independently and called it maturity, when really we've just normalized emotional isolation as an adaptation to widespread father absence? We celebrate the single mothers who do it all. We admire the kids who turned out fine despite everything. We valorize independence and self-sufficiency. But what if this celebration is actually a defense? What if we've built an entire cultural identity around not needing the thing we desperately needed? The truth is, Humans aren't meant to develop in isolation. We're not designed to raise ourselves. The myth of the self-made person is just that, a myth. And for those who grew up without fathers, that myth is particularly cruel, because it suggests that if you're still struggling, it's a personal failure rather than a predictable outcome of early loss. This isn't just about father absence anymore. It's about how our species copes with uncertainty, with rupture, with the gap between what we need and what we receive. It's about the choice between acknowledging the wound or performing in vulnerability. And maybe the most radical thing you can do is refuse the performance. To say, yes, this absence shaped me. Yes, I adapted in ways that made sense then and cost me now. Yes, I'm still learning how to be close to people. And no, that doesn't make me broken. It makes me human. So here's my question for you. When you look at your own patterns around attachment, independence, worthiness, do you see the adaptations you made to survive father absence? And if so, which parts of those adaptations do you want to keep, and which parts are you ready to outgrow? I'm curious what resonates for you. Let me know in the comments.